And then when you experience that as a person, as an advisor, then you're just like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And you don't get it unless you go through it. And sometimes I add the SH on there, right? You don't know what you're going through, then you go through it, right? Then the advisor can learn that, and then they want to impart that and share that with their clients.
You wanna grow and go and get there, sometimes upward, sometimes nowhere. You've got the ideas, you're looking up at the clouds, but how do you start standing out of the crowd? So build it with us from the ground up.
Hey everybody, welcome to From the Ground Up. I'm Zach Conway. I'm here as always with Kelsey McKenna, and we are continuing to record live at the Shift Conference. It's the go-to industry event for financial advisors who celebrate the impact of holistic, human-first financial advice. And we're very excited to have our next guest with us, Dr. Preston Cherry. Dr. Cherry is an award-winning financial advisor who's the founder and CEO of Concurrent Financial Planning. He's the host of the Life Money Balance podcast. And he's also, of course, a professor to the next generation of financial planning professionals. You're only slightly busy.
Just a little bit.
busy.
We appreciate you joining us.
Yes, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So actually, we want to kind of dive into that role, maybe talk about all your different roles that you're up to right now, but specifically on what it is to be a professor right now to the next gen of people coming into this industry. Kelsey and I keep talking about, we're at this conference, it's about human-centric advice, right, and sort of the weird irony or paradox that that's not a thing we all do by default as advisors in this space, right? Like, money is human, it's complex, we have deep conversations about it. And so I'm curious, as I think what's going to be necessary, we talk a lot about how do we get to that default state as an industry. It's going to take the next generation to actually get there.
Yep.
So you're in the room.
Yep.
You're the guy solving the problem with these, kids coming up through these programs. Tell us about that. Are they embracing this mindset? Because they need to be good practitioners. They need to know how to do financial planning, but they need to be able to have these human conversations. And I'm very curious your perspective on how they're embracing that.
Well, good question too. Well, younger folks, right? That's another thing. They don't like to be called kids anymore. They're young, they're young adults. So, but they're more gentle.
Yeah.
I'm Gen X. I think y'all around there saying that too. And then in the generation before that, the discussion lines weren't open. Yeah. So the expectations of dealing with or interacting with professionals at your job or the services that you inquire, the expectations are different. With the younger generation, because they have been raised differently, as far as with mental health in mind and embracing good cultures at the workplace and this, the home environments and this, that, and the other, right? At school, there's an emphasis on trying to navigate bullying, all this. All right. So again, it's that more, gentle cycle. So this is table stakes for the human side of money, right? And when they're talking to their advisors, and because they're actually engaging advisors at a higher rate, the younger millennials, Gen Zers, and all that. So they're speaking with advisors now that look and sound like them. So it's table stakes for them to have that human component. And if there's no, you don't have, to me as a professor, I don't have to sell them on it. They're like, wow, this is what they know. Yeah. Right. And to them, it's like, well, why is it there more of this?
Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, we're talking to some advisors that we're trying to untrain, right? Unlearn, right? Yeah. There it is, unlearn some of that stuff. There's a little bit of, not necessarily, sometimes it's resistance, but it also is just like, man, I got to learn something new. And that, whereas you're starting with a clean slate with the generation. Yeah.
So something that's like popping up for me is vulnerability and like this kind of fear. I think sometimes with a more traditional advisory practice and how you've traditionally sold your services and whatnot, coming in, it requires vulnerability on the part of the advisor to open your client up to being vulnerable, and there's that trust building that needs to happen. So I could totally see how the younger generations are coming in. They're already open to that. They already feel comfortable doing that. what encouragement would you have? Like I feel like when I listen to Life Money Balance, I've listened to a few episodes. I will say, I listened to a few of the early ones too. The one with your parents, I liked it. They're great. Talk to me about like vulnerability and how that has been powerful for you in your practice, and how you kind of, you don't have to sell them on it, but kind of build that knowledge of how to use it to your advantage in your practice. Oh
yeah. First of all, thank you for being a listener. And, and I kicked off the show with the Life Money Balance podcast with the parents on purpose.
Yeah.
Is because when we were talking about the younger generation, it's natural to them.
Yeah.
And the reason, and you asked me, why it's important to me and how I incorporate it into my practice and where I got it from them. It was table stakes for me too.
Yeah.
So I got the doctor thing, from stuff I already learned from them.
Right? It's official.
Yeah, it's just official, right?
Yeah.
But I got it from them. And that episode demonstrated to the world, it's like, oh, that's where you got the money conversations. That's where you got the vulnerability. That's where you got the courage, the empathy, the compassion. Oh, okay. I'm beginning to understand, because you got to see it in your home.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's important to me. And being affirmed as a person coming up, as a young person and throughout life, I always say that self-worth and self-value are two of your most compoundable assets in a person.
Yeah.
And if you have that, no one can really take that away from you. You can use that to go produce the wealth and income that you need to fund your life. Put the message behind the action, all right, and demonstrate to people, particularly advisors, and say, this is the reason why you need this, to connect with your clients. First of all, do the work yourself.
Yeah.
Rick Hale talks about it a lot, and so does Sandra Davis and a whole bunch of other folks, right? They say, do the work yourself. It's therapy of the self, so like financial therapy. Do your own audit, you have to go through your own courageous and bold, or what I call a emotional HSA, right? It's honest self audit. Admit where you are, acknowledge how you feel about it, so you can take action. So do your work yourself. And then when you experience that as a person, as an advisor, then you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And you don't get it unless you go through it. And sometimes I add the SH on there, right? You don't know what you're going through, then you go through it, right? And then when you do that, then you're like, okay, here's the value.
Yeah.
And then the advisor can learn that, and then they want to impart that and share that with their clients. And their clients then receive that because they can feel it. That feeling goes into the numbers, and they can feel that too because it's measurable. And then that's when the advocacy comes into place. And they say, you know what, my financial advisor, this is what we're doing over here. And then we got when Harry met Sally moment. It's like, I'll have what she's having.
Love a good rom-com reference.
Right.
Finally,
we got to weave at least one in every episode.
Someone's referencing my favorite movie. Yeah. Yes. No, that's awesome. It's funny because when I was listening to the episode, not to keep bringing your parents up, but when I was listening to that episode, I was just thinking how unusual it kind of is. Like they were talking about breaking generational cycles, and that's kind of what we're talking about in this industry, is this next generation coming in. And I've talked to some next gen advisors who are at traditional, like more legacy style firms, and they're struggling to break those cycles because they think this is important, but there isn't necessarily like that proof of like, this is why it's better. And so maybe that is if they can just get that primary advisor or those lead advisors to go through those transformations themselves.
Right. And here's where we can tie it into like a industry conversation. We are having all these conversations about organic growth. Oh my goodness, we hear that one more time. It's a buzzword, right?
Yeah.
It's like hearing dovish when we're talking about interest rates. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. If I hear dovish, one more
hawkish,
time, right? Hawkish, right? And the same thing here. It's like, well, how do you tie that to organic growth? And some firms say, well, I'm not trying to grow. But you can shrink.
Yeah. You can shrink.
You
Are
can
you
have
trying
attrition.
to not shrink?
Yeah. You can have attrition. And now where the wealth transfer to Gen X, got to come through Gen X. Gen X is the forgotten generation for real. It's like, it's going to millennials. I'm like, hey, over here. It's going
been here this whole time.
Yeah. And then it's going to go to millennials and Gen Zers and this, that, and the other. So the cross-generational talk is already occurring.
Right.
So if you don't want to grow, that's fine, but you don't want to shrink. You don't want to have attrition. And if we're not having this conversation, and if you don't want to in an altruistic manner, okay, that's fine. But it will affect the bottom line.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk about, because there are so many of these buzzwords and sort of like these industry topics that get cycled around, and the generational transfer of wealth topic has now been out there as a topic for a decade. And what we talk about a lot is, I think advisors, it kind of feels like the boy who cried wolf, like they haven't felt the pain enough, and that attrition hasn't really started to happen enough.
Yeah.
Although I do think they're starting to feel it. And all of a sudden, this thing that they created, this like cognitive dissonance of that's not real. We'll be able to continue to grow our way with the same demographics of clients. All of a sudden, I think some wake up calls are happening. There's a stat I've reused now probably 100 times, but I think it's so compelling. Cerulli stat.
Yeah.
90% of affluent investors, next-gen investors, who had enough of a sort of wealth situation to go seek a human financial advisor, who also their parents had an advisor at the time of seeking an advisor, 90% of that demo didn't even consider their parents' advisor.
That's right.
That's terrifying.
It is.
Right? And so and the obvious to connect the dots is all they want in the next generation, the same way the students are saying it to you, you don't need to sell them on the concept. They want to feel heard and understood. That's all they care about. Everything else is table stakes. Your ability to do financial planning, table stakes. You assume you can do the dollars and cents thing the right way. Why would they assume that they're going to feel heard and understood by an advisor that's never even tried to speak to them?
Right. And I think the big boxes, they're starting to understand. They're starting to understand it too, because their own research is showing too, just not Cerulli, maybe Schwab, or UBS, this, that, and the other. I mean, so they have the resources that, like the T Row and all these, they have these studies too. It's like that very stat.
Yeah.
So they're emphasizing cross-generational talk. So naturally, the RIAs, they should do that too. And I guess the human side of money, really, the RIAs actually led that because they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Now it's just now really, really popular. But on the flip side, as far as the cross-generational aspect, the bigger boxes tend to have that cross-generational relationship. So they have to take heed like now. Right. And going back to Kelsey, your point about, young people, this is very important. Young folks, in having environments, which is a culture environment at your practice, to where young folks can come in, be groomed, and be a part of the firm, and not just, hey, staple these papers or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. It's very important. So when you're having these cross-generational talks, and when you have the parent or the grandparent in, then, that Z or younger millennial, not the deal with the company they call them geriatric millennials now. I'm like, y'all want to be Gen
my
X.
category.
Yeah.
It's very upsetting.
I want to be Gen Xers so much. But when the younger generations come in, then they're like, okay, who's cool in here?
Yeah.
Who's the person that I can relate to?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you, meaning the firm, has that talent coming up the pipeline, right, and that talent feels like they're plugged in and they're a member.
Yeah.
Right. Of the movement of that firm, an important thing. Then the people walking through the door, the younger generation, is like, oh, okay, yes, I see them. And that right there that's the piece of the cross. That's the glue. Yeah. Right there.
Yeah. And I think to some extent, advisors get that. I think where things go really wrong, and I get so excited about this, but where things go really wrong is when it's like, okay, we're bringing in this young advisor, we're bringing in this young planner, and they're going to fix the next gen problem, right? And they don't actually listen at all to that younger person and contribute and kind of go back and forth, because the firm or the advisor, the lead advisor, they have a ton of knowledge and a ton of information that young person needs, but then that young person is also coming in with knowledge that advisor needs. And so I do see sometimes that friction coming up where it's almost like, well, you haven't done this before, so you need to just listen to me and do it my way, versus a more collaborative, how are we moving into the future, which is I think what that next gen wants. They want to be a contributing member, not just an employee.
Can you, I know you're also involved with the FinServe Foundation, right? So speak to that, right? Because you're seeing, you're in the classroom and then the segue into the industry. And to Kelsey's point, I think larger firms get this conceptually. They need younger talent, but they're throwing them in there and saying, go solve our problems.
Solve the next gen problem.
Solve the next gen problem. We know it's the path to longer term, sustainable, organic growth. So, hey, 20-year-old, go fix this for us.
Yeah, but don't mess with our current.
Yeah,
Don't touch our current
don't
stuff.
actually change anything.
Yeah.
Just, you make sure everybody's walking in the door. What are your thoughts on that? Like, how do larger firms fix that cultural problem so that they can attract those people coming through FinServe or stepping out of your classroom into the industry? Because I don't think we're meeting them halfway as an industry. Again, we get the concept, we want to fix it, but we're not committing to it.
It's a big gap. I was just having a conversation with my ride share, Lyft, and they were coming in, and it was a younger person, and they were like, I would love to take more advice from my older counterparts, but it's just the way they go about it. They shouting all the time, they're telling this, this, that, and the other, and that's how we got it, just what it was. It was like, you did this and that was that, right? That's the hand, so you did this, right? All right. And then on the flip side of that, he also understood, which this is awareness from young people, is like there's a lot of things you don't know, and you do need to learn your craft. It does take time. Just the society in general, everything is expedited seeming nowadays. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're gonna go get your own firm. You're gonna have no. It doesn't work like that. And you could have a unicorn, but it's not. Probability is unlikely. But what's the point to all that? Is that this is the issue right now with talent and firms. Is that they do have to have a collaborative process and understand that they have to learn from one another. All right, they have to learn from and respect one another. And I think there has to be a value, understanding, and a respect. And value is very important. Not only that the owner or the leaders, they have to value the young folks. The young folks actually have to assign some value of what they're receiving. It's like, oh yeah, I want to have ownership. I want to do this. I want to have this high salary. I want to do this. Hey, I'm like, look, value. Nobody's saying you should be underpaid. They're not saying it, and nobody's saying that you should be in a work environment that's not good. All right. Also, that goes along with that is place value on learning your craft. I always tell a lot of people all the time. I said Michael Jackson was at Motown for like 10 years before he moonwalked. Because he took a minute. It took a minute, right? He was with the Jackson 5 doing the robot. Joe Jackson was beating him up and all this other stuff. But
he got there despite.
Right. But the thing about it is, he learned his craft. Smokey Robinson was teaching him how to do voiceovers and this, that, and the other.
Right.
So young people have to place value. Both parties have to place value on one another. To collaborate in order to do this. And finally, I'll say this, which is firms have to come up with, and I think there's a lot of folks that are attempting this, but this is the magic pill. Firms have to come up with a residency system to know that those first 3 years, 3 to 5 years, you are grooming someone. You are, placing resources into someone.
You're investing.
You're investing. That's the word. Yes, you are investing to someone. And the young person or career change needs to understand that too. You're investing 5 years. And the key thing, yes, it's high risk sometimes because, that person may jump or something like that, but not if that person feels like they are part of the firm. And here's the stat. It's not a key. I don't have a hard stat on this, but the industry is showing every firm wants a 5 to 7 year person that's like 30 with experience. It's the same resume. It's the same call for to talent.
It's wild.
The reason why that doesn't, the reason why that doesn't exist, right, is because they're staying where they are. They're staying where they are. So you have to pick up that person that just got out of a program and invest in them, Kelsey, like you said. And then when they feel like they're connected, they'll stay.
It's so hard, right? Because the incentive structure for especially larger firms that maybe have older advisors is they'd rather go attract the advisor who's got $500 million of assets under management because it's cash flow. It's cash flow. And that's a long-term investment in their mind, right? And is there enough pain at a firm like that to say, I want to make this investment? I would say too, if they do, we're kind of circling on this. You have to build, like when we talk about culture, it means what are you putting out in the world as a value proposition in a clear, articulate way as a firm? That's the only way you're actually going to attract the talent that you aspire to have in that demographic that everybody's looking for. Are you a firm that actually talks the talk, walks the walk in terms of this value proposition we're here talking about of human-centric advice? Because if that's not deeply embedded in your brand identity, what the legacy advisors talk about, how you're selling to the market, you're not going to attract that talent, and then you're certainly not going to keep that talent, right? Because you've got the people training those people who are ultimately still talking about how to sell investments and, there's a disconnect. So you can want the person, but it really has to bleed through every aspect of the company to actually pull it off, right? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm like, how do you do that? How do you bring it to life? Which is something we talk a lot about. There's a lot of like similar branding and similar messaging within the industry in terms of how an RIA positions their services, like comprehensive, fiduciary. There's a lot of like buzzwords almost that I think if you read it, you're like, oh, that sounds great. But how do you actually like live it within the firm? How do we do things here? And so I wonder if you have any tips on, because you are kind of doing this in your practice, any tips for firms who are trying to kind of make this shift with their culture and the way that they run their business. What would you recommend to them as a starting point?
Yes, believing, number one.
Actually being real.
Yeah, I mean, it is a thing.
It's not just a tactic.
It's not just a tactic. I think that having that belief system is number one, and then actually going through a process to have a signaling system, an audit to say, how are we going to communicate this not only internally but externally? How are we going to interject these things into our processes? All right, like for instance, I give you an example. I mean, I actually have a money psychology meeting in the financial planning process. All right, so we actually take pause to reflect on some of those, human aspects. Let's unpack that for a minute. As far as, let's take, for example, couples conversations. All right. And we probably learned that through the discovery meeting. Our discovery meetings is both qualitative and quantitative. All right. We also send a 10 question. We call it the life, money, balance, wealth and assessment, whatever, but they can just point and click. All right. So now, and it's automated. So after the meeting, you get this, and they send it out, and we get it back. It's like, okay, this is going to help us prepare for the next meeting, right? And then we get to spend time and kids. There's a couple of people. Sometimes you get Carl, and they call it just so you can interject some organization in there, this, that, and the other, right? And make it a solid meeting. But that's a example of taking that meeting to focus on perhaps something non-numbers, but see what we learn from that is going to inform all the numbers.
Right.
All right. So not only first it's a belief system, then it's an audit of, what are you communicating to your prospective clients or your clients internally, externally, and then what are you doing as far as an action point to, interject your system with those actions.
Yeah. Are you putting resources toward it at all? Like if you're not putting time toward it, you're just saying it like such a clear way. If you audit your time, are you spending any time with your client on any of this?
Right.
That's
Would you say it's so the unlearning? So the younger generation gets this, to your point, and so they're easier to train toward what will your process be? How will you bring this to life in your business? The unlearning part, advisors who have been in the business for a longer time, it's hard. And I think, maybe they're attending conferences like this, they're maybe taking some courses here and there, but they still really struggle with like that momentum moment. You knew it naturally, right? It was your upbringing. You wanted to be in this industry, but you're a unicorn relative to the rest of the industry. Like that initial creation of momentum. How do advisors just tomorrow, like what would you change tomorrow in your business? I sometimes think that just thinking through your process, right? What are the meetings you have when somebody walks in the door? What are the meetings you have? Because especially in those first meetings, that's how you're framing the relationship for what could be the next 40 years of a relationship with your client. Absolutely. You're talking about a discovery process, right? And the specifics of what that is that maybe where advisors could start, like just auditing literally, what are the questions you ask when people walk in the door?
Mm-hmm.
What are you assessing about people? Because maybe that's the jumping off point, because that informs everything.
It does inform. I mean, they said, what was that? Goodwill Hunting at the end of the movie, he said, he stole my line. You know, yeah, right. But yeah, right. But yes, it informs everything. And this is the key. It does inform everything. So like peppering little questions, like in my intake form on the website. All right. One of the last questions is, you know, how confident do you feel about your finances? Scale of 1 to 5, sitting right there, something to that effect, right? And so that one question, because it's name, email, it's annual income, what do you have in your savings accounts, what else, your occupation, and this what brought you here, and then confidence question. Submit. So it start right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're setting an expectation. Yeah.
So when we have the good fit meeting, this is 20 minutes. All right. You know, tell me a little bit more about, you said your confidence level is 7. You know, why 7 and not 10?
Yeah.
You know, unpack that for me a little bit.
Yeah.
Pause, chill, right? That right there is a jump off point.
Yeah.
You know, it's a small example, but big example, because you're allowing someone to unpack about their emotions. It's think, feel, behave, your emotions, your attitude, your value system, your experiences, right? All right. You also can ask, okay, you know, what brought you here? And then another question is, you know, tell me what's on the top of mind for you right now. I mean, it sounds like a general question, but what's top of mind from you right now? When they ask you that, okay, unpack that for me for a little bit. You know, why is it top of mind? Or if you had that they worked for another advisor with another advisor, what was missing out of that relationship that you would like to see in you know, better outcomes? You know, what was missing that you'd like to see? Right?
Do you still have people, when you're taking them through, so intake form, you segue into a deeper discovery, and you're asking these questions, do you still have people who walk in the door saying basically like, why the heck are you what are you talking about? I want you to manage my money. Why are you asking me about my relationship with money? What is this about?
Yeah. And you know what? We're getting some. I just wrote an article about it. It's not published yet, but it will be. But there's people pushing back, even advisors pushing back. It's like, you know, people just want, you know, they want. I use this article. They want the Joe Friday. They want just the facts, ma'am. They want just the facts, right? And but you can't have financial planning without the question.
Yeah.
So at some point you gotta ask the question at some point. So yes, if somebody says, "Oh, okay, yeah, I want to do a backdoor Roth," I've been hearing about it on whatever resource, Nerd Wallet, Investment, whatever it may be. Right?
Yeah.
We heard about this backdoor Roth thing. Let's do it. Show me how to do it.
Yeah.
All right. What is the next question?
Right.
The next question is, you know, this is basic, but it's why.
Why?
Yep.
Yeah. Why do you want to backdoor?
It's always just ask the follow-up question. What is the motivation?
Right. Right. And I'm saying I'm happy to show that to you. Sure. You know, and there's a lot of nuances with the backdoor Roth. You know, there's some common mistakes. You know, what have you heard? And I'll let them. I'll allow them, not allow, but just hey, open floor. What have you heard about the advantage and disadvantage about you know, backdoor Roth? What have you heard?
Yeah.
And so right there, I'm not shaming them or anything like that. It's like, okay, that's what you came in with. Fantastic. Hey,
we're going to start there.
Yeah, we're not
going to end there.
You know what?
Yeah.
Show me, you know, show me about the backdoor Roth, please. You know, right. And then you just sit there, right? And then you say, okay, this is great. And I said, those are some good advantages, particularly, you know, where you are. Why is this important to you? Yeah. And we're right back at the why.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so there may be something. There may be hating the government. It may be tax. It may be this. It may be that. You know, it may be an urgency of, you know, maybe not outliving their money or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever it may be, but there's some sort of a reason attached to that.
Right.
And then once we know more of the why, then we can say, okay, yes, this is more useful, and then tie it back to what they shared with us. And then what they're going to say then is they'll be like, you know, maybe that's not for me. Thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
we talk about it's it's a scary leap of faith. People may sort of raise their eyebrows at you because they've grown up, especially maybe older prospective clients. They don't know that this is really our value, right? Yeah. Because they haven't experienced it in that way. So they raise their eyebrows at you because why are you asking me about these deeper things in my life? Solve my Roth conversion problem.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so that feels scary, even to advisors at a conference like this one. But we always talk about that anxiety is better than the anxiety that you perpetuate across a 30-year relationship with that person because you never ask the follow-up question.
Right.
It's transactional. You deliver that one-off solution and service, but you're never getting to the heart of the matter. You walk into review meetings with people and you still don't know each other, maybe after decades of what you're actually trying to solve for, because you weren't willing to, again, to tie back to like that just leap of faith and discovery, asking the next question, getting to true motivation. So speak to that for a second, but it sounds like you've avoided that in how you've run your business.
I'll say this that, some people read the room. Read the room.
Right.
So some folks, they don't want to go into a lot of depth and the like. All right. So there's tiers or levels to how much you're going to interact with someone with these questions. Next question. You're gonna feel that.
Yeah.
Right. That said, you still have to have some element of discovery, human discovery with this person, and they'll appreciate it. Although, just because a client wants something doesn't mean that it's right for them. All right. So you may skipping right to the whatever they ask for.
Yeah.
Again, it's their best interest, and also we have to remain neutral and get rid of our biases and say, oh well, yeah, you may want to roll over, but I think you need this. That's not the case.
Yeah.
The case is that it's a duty to ask. Because the financial planning process, when folks say that financial planning is not defined, yes, it is. It has a definition. It is a collaborative process, all right, to help someone with their achieve their life and financial goals through financial advice, integrating relevant elements across the life stage. Right. That's the definition.
Yeah,
that's what we do. So, and then step 1 and 2 is understanding the client attitude, values, and that, right?
Yeah.
So you cannot you cannot serve.
Yeah.
You cannot have the best interest of the client without asking at least 1 or 2 questions.
It's amazing. And we all logically know it, right? Money's the most complicated thing in our lives.
Yeah.
It's scary to engage. It's scary to ask those follow-up questions.
Yeah.
What you're doing is amazing. I think in particular with Next Generation, because that's going to be what kind of creates this movement at scale, is obviously, these people coming into the industry. So appreciate what you do. Appreciate you joining us today. Where should people find you right now?
Sure. All over the social channels, Dr. Preston Cherry. So Dr. Preston Cherry, and then concurrentfp.com.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you joining the conversation. If you haven't checked out Seeds, please do so. We're at www.seedsinvestor.com. We're on X, we're on LinkedIn, we're on this podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.